White bride walked out after learning groom's father was black, but the ceremony had already started. What happens when a successful man gets abandoned at the altar, all because his father is black? You won't believe how one courtroom moment turned him into the voice of a generation. When the double doors of St. Raymond's Chapel swung open with that slow, dramatic creak, the kind you only hear in cathedrals or horror movies, everybody in the pews turned. But no one moved, no one whispered. Even the lilies arranged in perfect symmetry along the aisle stood straighter, like they knew something unholy was about to interrupt this holy union. And there he was, Darius James Robinson, standing tall up front by the altar, dressed in an ivory tuxedo that looked like it came straight out of GQ, but tailored with something more personal. Pride. His jaw was clenched but not tight, his shoulders squared but not stiff. His face, well, his face told a whole story without a single word, somewhere between hopeful and bracing for impact. Because Darius, unlike most grooms, knew this wedding might come with fireworks, and not the celebratory kind. Behind him, the crowd sat like a pastel parade. The Merrick family and their circle, in carefully chosen tones of beige and eggshell, pressed collars and silk scarves, everyone smelling like generational wealth in lavender lotion. The type who drink cucumber water at brunch and vote progressive as long as progress doesn't marry into their family. Darius turned slightly to glance at the front pew, where his father, Samuel Robinson, sat alone but filled the bench like it was a throne. An Army vet, decorated, weathered, a man whose silence said more than any lecture. His suit wasn't flashy, just clean, but his presence, that was a monument. His back straight like it refused to carry shame, his eyes sharp but not angry, and pinned to his chest, medals that said he had fought not just for his country, but for his right to be seen. Next to Samuel, an empty seat. That was for Darius's mother, gone years ago. Heart gave out, or, as Samuel would say, her heart just got tired of pushing back against a system that always pushed harder. This was the weight Darius carried, not on his shoulders, in his soul. And then the organ began to play. The doors opened again. Here came Allison Merrick, radiant, perfect. That kind of beautiful you could see was expensive. Her white dress sparkled, her teeth gleamed, her eyes locked ahead, straight to the man she was supposed to marry. And the room, they clapped, like she just walked onto the stage of a Broadway show. It was a performance, and the crowd was ready to cheer. Everything was picture perfect, until it wasn't. Because halfway down the aisle, Allison's eyes drifted. Off Darius, past the altar, past the flowers, they landed on Samuel, and the switch flipped. You could see it, clear as day. Her step faltered. One heel scraped carpet. Her breathing changed. Her mouth parted, just slightly. And then it hit her. Wait, that's his father? She whispered it. Not loud, but loud enough. Like someone standing in line for a buffet and realizing the meat was something they didn't approve of. The room went silent. Not a respectful silence. A stunned, pin drop. Did she just? Silence. You could hear someone's bracelet rattle as they tried not to gasp. One old lady dropped her glass of sparkling wine. Samuel didn't flinch, didn't blink. He'd seen this movie before. Hell, he could have written the script. Allison turned to her mother, who was now white-knuckling her purse, hissing through gritted teeth. Smile, keep walking. Everything is fine. Everything was not fine. Allison turned back, paused, and did the unthinkable. She turned around and walked out. No tantrum, no tears, just silence. Her veil trailing behind her like it was embarrassed to be part of this scene. Those same doors that opened for her grand entrance now slammed shut behind her retreat. Darius stood there, still, like someone unplugged his soul. He didn't run after her, didn't call out her name. His hands stayed by his sides, because something deep in his bones, something passed down through blood and struggle, had already told him this was coming. See, he thought the hardest fight would be building a future together. Turns out the real war started the moment she saw his past, his roots, his family, his bloodline, and decided it didn't fit her picture. He didn't lose a bride that day. He lost an illusion. The crowd, of course, started buzzing like a hive that had just been kicked. She just walked out? Why didn't she say something sooner? He's actually really handsome. This is sad. Sad? Sad was watching a man be disqualified from love because of his father's melanin. Sad was being told you're amazing, smart, professional, and a catch, until someone realized your lineage didn't come with a yacht club membership. Samuel rose, quietly, walked to his son, laid a hand on his shoulder. Not to comfort, but to anchor. You did right, son, he said low and calm. They didn't. That was it. No speeches, no revenge, just clarity. And then Darius said the line that would echo far beyond that chapel. This wasn't a choice, it was a test, and she failed. Outside, the chaos was already waiting. A guest had uploaded the video, Allison freezing, spinning around, storming off. Captioned, "Runaway bride meets the father of the groom. Spoiler alert, he's black." The post blew up. TikTok, Instagram, cable news, hashtags, hot takes, memes. Some comments hit like nails. At least she dipped before the vows. How did she not know? The man's got his daddy's face. It's not a wedding. It's a wake-up call. But beyond the noise, a quieter voice started to rise. One Darius had always heard inside, but rarely out loud. "You're not alone. You're not the first. You won't be the last." Let's talk about that Merrick family, though. You want to understand what polished prejudice looks like? That's them. Old money, old rules, old ideas dressed in designer suits. They host galas for diversity in the arts, but won't let their daughter marry a man whose dad served in Vietnam. They donate to community uplift programs, but have never stepped foot in the zip code they're uplifting. Allison's mother, when she first learned Darius was a finance guy from Harvard, she clapped like her daughter won a prize. When she saw a photo of Samuel, she didn't clap. She clutched her pearls so tight it's a wonder they didn't shatter. And you want to know what's wild? Darius still believed he could belong. He thought maybe, just maybe, the degrees, the job, the manners, the clothes, the calm demeanor, maybe all of that could cover his background like fresh paint on an old wall. But racism has a way of sniffing out the truth. It doesn't care about resumes. It sees blood. And on that day, Darius bled dignity. Not because he was hurt, but because he stood still, while the people around him crumbled in their own hypocrisy. That night back home, Darius took off the tux, poured a glass of whiskey, sat down with his father, and spoke not like a man defeated, but like a man reborn. "I want them to regret this," he said. "Not because I'm black, but because I'm not the one they can break." And that was the real beginning. 3 days. That's how long it had been since the wedding. That became the wedding that went viral. A ceremony meant to be replayed over anniversaries now looped endlessly on social media feeds with captions like, "White bride bolts after seeing groom's father. His only crime? He's black." In every corner of the internet, opinions erupted like popcorn in a hot pan. Some said, "At least she was honest." Others weren't so gentle. "This ain't honesty, it's cowardice dipped in racism and sprinkled with generational prejudice." But no matter where you landed on the spectrum, one thing was clear. The fallout had a name, Darius Robinson. And that morning, finally, Darius got dressed. It was the first time in 3 days he put on a real shirt. The first time he stepped outside without hearing his thoughts echo like an empty auditorium. The wedding hangover wasn't just emotional. It was viral. It was social. It was everywhere. And waiting at his door, Philip Carter. Not just any friend. Philip had once dated Allison himself before realizing her Instagram filters extended past selfies and straight into her soul. "Man," Philip said, without so much as a hello, "you look like you climbed out of a car fire." Darius raised an eyebrow. "And you look like you brought gas to keep it burning." Philip smirked, unfazed, and held out a red folder. Thin, sharp, dangerous. Inside, screenshots, documents, posts from private groups, receipts, literal and figurative, everything Darius needed to not just defend himself, but to demolish the porcelain fairy tale of the Merrick family and their pure pedigree. Scene cut, Merrick family law office. Marble floors, oil paintings that looked expensive and historically questionable. You know the ones, where black folks held trays but never titles. Across the desk, Gregory Slater, the kind of lawyer who polished his cufflinks more than his conscience. He smiled like someone who just ate the last slice of power and knew you wouldn't complain. "Mr. Robinson," Slater began, his voice smoother than a trust fund, "we understand emotions have been high, but unfortunately, Ms. Merrick's reputation has suffered immensely due to your conduct." Darius blinked once. No smile, no sarcasm, just precision. He reached into the red folder, pulled out a single sheet, and slid it across the desk. "Here's your client," he said, talking in a private group about how she almost ended up in a boat with a descendant of slaves. Dated February 19th, 6:14 p.m. I've got the emojis, too. Real classy stuff. Slater picked up the paper like it might bite him. His face dropped a shade. The smile vanished. "Well," he muttered, "this appears to be private correspondence?" "Yeah," Darius cut him off. Private like your moral compass. Here's another. She calls my father a surprise under the hood, like he's an engine she forgot to check. That one hit hard. Slater's lips twitched, but the performance was over. And yet the Merricks weren't finished. The very next day they filed a lawsuit. Emotional distress. You heard that right. Apparently being exposed to a black in-law was traumatic enough to call the court. Mr. Robinson withheld culturally relevant information, the suit claimed. Our client entered this engagement under the assumption that the groom's family aligned with her social expectations. Translation? She thought his daddy was white. Darius read it and laughed. I've seen better fiction on daytime soap operas, he told Philip. Samuel, reading it over coffee, just grunted. Cultural expectations? Boy, I bled for this country. Got medals to prove it, but I guess that ain't culture enough for Little Miss Ice Queen. The pressure mounted. News anchors called. Podcasters begged for interviews. Tabloids ran headlines like, "From altar to ambush, the wedding that shocked the South." But Darius, he stayed silent. Not because he was scared, because he was planning. And then came the unexpected twist. Senator Thomas Merrick, Allison's father. White hair, whiter suit, whiter public image than a snowstorm in Vermont. He appeared live on CNN, face composed, voice soft as linen. My daughter, he said, acted impulsively under immense pressure. This is not about race. It's about emotion. Let's not turn this into a political witch hunt. A witch hunt? Against whom? Darius watched that clip and didn't say a word. But his silence wasn't empty. It was loaded. And then, the final blow. A leaked video. Captured at a brunch cafe 2 weeks before the wedding. Allison, sipping something pink, lounging with a girlfriend. I just couldn't do it, she said, giggling. I mean, I don't want kids who look different, you know? What would Grandpa say when he saw those curls at Christmas? That clip made its way to Twitter, and Twitter burned the house down. Allison vanished. Gone from Instagram, gone from LinkedIn, gone like a ghost who realized it was haunting the wrong house. The Merricks issued a statement. Ms. Merrick is currently taking time for herself. Her mental well-being is our priority. Translation, we're trying to outrun the shame. But you can't outrun digital footprints, especially not when they wear white heels and leave trails of hypocrisy. And Darius, he waited. And then 3 days after that cafe video leaked, he went live. He sat in front of his laptop, clean background, clear eyes. No press team, no handlers, just him. And he said, I'm not here to play victim. I'm here to be a mirror. What happened to me happens every day, to people without cameras, without followers, without backup. But I had a father who taught me that dignity don't bend, even when the system tries to break it. He paused. I loved her. I planned a life with her. I even believed her family could change. I was wrong, but I'm still standing. And if you think I'm going to stay quiet because someone didn't like the shade of my legacy, think again. The video went viral, not for drama, but because it struck a nerve. People didn't just see a man dumped at the altar. They saw every workplace slight, every coded rejection, every fake smile that came with a clause. And for the first time, the country didn't see Darius as the broken groom. They saw him as a man who refused to be broken. The morning of the hearing, the sky had the nerve to be shamelessly clear. Not a single cloud, not even a breeze to shift the atmosphere. Just blue, wide, unflinching, almost taunting. Like the universe itself looked down at Darius Robinson and dared him. Go on then, son. Let's see how much truth you can carry before it breaks you. He stood outside the county courthouse, its neoclassical facade stretching high like it had something to prove. Marble pillars reaching for heaven, as if righteousness could be carved into stone. A bronze plaque by the entrance read, Justice for all. But everybody in that city who'd lived longer than a lease agreement knew the truth. All rarely meant you if your skin kissed the sun like his did. Darius walked inside in a charcoal gray suit, tie knotted tight, shirt crisp. But his face, that face looked like it was headed to a funeral, not a wedding aftermath. And maybe in a way he was, because today they were bearing illusions. The courtroom was full, not packed like a stadium, but charged. Tension coiled in the air like the seconds before a storm. On the right, the Merrick clan, pale as fresh snow and twice as smug. Seated in tailored confidence, the family radiated generational privilege in every twitch. Their star litigator, Gregory Slater, sparkled like a used car salesman's daydream. His Harvard law pin caught the light every time he shifted, as though pedigree could excuse prejudice. On the left, Darius, alone. No team of attorneys, no press agents. Just one red folder and the kind of stillness that comes when you've walked through fire and decided you'd never let it touch your soul again. And behind him, Samuel Robinson, father, veteran, oak tree in human form, sitting upright in the back row, unmoving, unwavering. His silence wasn't absence, it was presence, louder than any protest sign. At the bench sat the judge, 60-ish, sharp-eyed, sharp-tongued, the kind of woman who looked like she didn't just read the law, she dared it to misbehave. Her voice, cool steel dipped in wisdom. She looked at Slater and said, "Let's begin." And the circus started. Slater strutted forward like a man certain the world owed him a round of applause. "Your Honor," he began, oozing condescension in a practiced tone, "our client, Miss Merrick, suffered emotional distress due to unforeseen and deeply jarring revelations regarding the Groom's family background." He paused for effect, scanning the room like a drama teacher, hoping his students were taking notes. "While race is not the issue, of course it was, we must address the Groom's failure to disclose certain cultural information that significantly impacted the emotional landscape of this engagement." It was all smoke and mirrors. No one said the word, but it filled the courtroom. Race. It hung in every breath, lurking behind each carefully chosen phrase. Like a ghost, everyone pretended wasn't haunting the room. Slater continued, "Miss Merrick was blindsided. The emotional shock was considerable. This was not about hate, it was about honesty." Then he rested his case, stepping back with the confidence of a man who'd never had to explain who he was to get a seat at the table. The judge turned to Darius. "Mr. Robinson?" He stood, slowly, calmly. No theatrics, just truth walking on two legs. He placed the red folder on the table. "Before I begin," he said, voice steady, "I'd like to clarify something. At what exact point was I expected to inform my fiancée that my father wasn't a tanned white man, but a black man?" The silence was so thick it had weight. "We ate dinner at his house," he continued. "She saw the family photos. She called him charming. Her mother said, 'Such clear diction,' a few chuckles, dry ones, from those who got it. Slater, not so much." Darius flipped the folder open, pulled out the first printout. "Here's a message she sent to a private group chat," he said. "If I'd known his father was that, I wouldn't have said yes." He held up another. "I can't bring Darius home to Grandpa if his dad shows up. He looks like he smuggles things." Darius paused, looked up. "He's a retired soldier. He smuggles fertilizer into his garden. That's it." Even the judge had to cough into her hand to hide the twitch of her mouth. And then, the video. He tapped his phone. A screen lit up. Cafe footage. Allison Merrick, laughing, wine glass in hand. "I just couldn't, you know. I want my kids to look like me. What would Grandpa say about curls at Christmas?" The judge inhaled. Deep, sharp, cold. She turned to Slater. "Were you aware of this recording?" "It only just surfaced," he stammered. "Convenient," she replied, deadpan. "Very convenient." And then from the back, Samuel stood up. No words, no drama, just movement, the kind that demanded attention without asking for it. "Permission to speak, Your Honor." She nodded once. He stepped forward, slowly, dressed in full uniform, medals shining, shoulders square like the flag was watching. "I fought for this country, bled for it, lost brothers for it, and I never thought I'd see the day I had to sit in a courtroom to prove I'm not a disgrace to marry into." He turned to Slater. "I'm not a threat. I'm not a mistake. I'm not a flaw in the family gene pool. I'm a father. I'm a citizen. And if that ain't good enough for the Merricks, then their standards don't deserve a man like my son." The room shifted. Not everyone stood, but enough. A young man in the back, a woman in a floral dress, the judge's own assistant. They rose, not in protest, in recognition of what truth looks like when it refuses to sit down. The judge raised a hand. "Enough." She looked around the room like a teacher who'd heard every excuse and was done grading bad essays. "This," she said, "is not a legitimate case. This is theater, and a shameful one at that." She turned to Slater. "I'm dismissing this claim, and I strongly advise your firm consider whether filing lawsuits for emotional fraud based on family heritage is the legacy you want." Then turning to Darius, "Mr. Robinson, have you ever considered public service?" He blinked. "I hope you haven't given up on it. We need more people who speak plainly, stand tall, and carry the kind of truth this courtroom just witnessed." As Darius walked out the courthouse, a reporter caught up with him. Older woman, no microphone, just a notebook and tired eyes. "Do you think they'll leave you alone now?" He didn't stop walking, just smiled. "I hope not," he said. "I hope they start listening." And that was what justice looked like. Not a gavel, not applause, just one man, standing tall, holding nothing but facts and fire, and finally being seen for who he'd always been. 2 weeks passed since the courtroom drama. When Darius Robinson had stepped out of that courthouse, the city didn't simply carry on. It woke up different. Not because the sun hit harder or the air smelled sweeter. No, the change wasn't in the weather. It was in the way the world finally saw him. At last, it became crystal clear who was holding real strength. He didn't take office. He didn't buy airtime or buy a network. He did something far simpler and far more powerful. He walked down the street with a chin that wouldn't bow. And that, as some discovered, was enough to unsettle more people than any lawsuit ever could. The media shifted gears. They stopped chasing after his tears. They weren't hunting for heartbreak anymore. Instead, they started reading aloud his court transcripts, reposting clips from his testimony, quoting him, "I am not the color of my skin. I am a human being. I am a father. I am proud of the man my son has become." They didn't know how to trim those lines to fit their comfort zones, because the threat wasn't in the words. It was that they rang too true. Meanwhile, Allison Merrick? Silence. Not a tweet, not an email, not even a public statement. She evaporated, ghosted her own narrative. But then came the delivery to the Robinson house, a plain, unmarked envelope with no stamp, no return address. Inside, one sheet of paper. And just 2 words. Sorry, too late. No tears, no excuses. Just a final admission that she had lost. Not just the man she was supposed to marry, but herself. She walked away, and the void she left spoke louder than any apology. On the other corner stood Senator Merrick, master of spin and reinvention. He appeared on MSNBC, voice smooth as polished wood, saying, "We recognize our mistakes and we intend to make amends. That is why my family will donate $100,000 to the Youth for Equality Fund." Oh, the irony. That fund was Philip Carter's creation, the same Philip who once sat across from Allison at dinner tables, unfiltered and honest. Within days, donations poured in from celebrities, business owners, even local churches. Every dollar felt like a slap in the face of the old guard America that had stuck in its ways for far too long. But here's where the real power showed itself. Not in rescue funds, but in letters. Ordinary people, ordinary black families. Fathers writing, "I didn't know how to explain to my son why they call us different." Mothers writing, "They left me because of the color of my mother's skin." Young men writing, "I was ready to quit, but now I'm ready to fight." They didn't ask for his story to change their lives. They thanked him because it already did. And then Harvard called. One afternoon, Darius sat behind his phone when the campus registrar's office sent an email. "Mr. Robinson, we would like to invite you to deliver the commencement speech. Your name has become a symbol of courage." He didn't RSVP yes right away. He paused, thought back to how, during undergrad, he'd stayed quiet while people labeled him too political, too serious, too black for their comfort. He remembered a frat house scene where a white student shouted, "There he is, our next Obama," and the room erupted in laughter. But it had hurt, especially in silence. This time, no laughter. He accepted. Graduation day came. Darius walked onto that stage in his gown, hood, and mortarboard, carrying a microphone and a conviction that dwarfed any expectations. In the sea of faces, white, black, Latinx, Asian, it was quiet, all eyes locked on him. He started softly, "I want to begin with gratitude to my father." The crowd rose with one breath. A wave of applause filled the hall. "He taught me never to apologize for who you are. He taught me dignity doesn't hang from your tie. It stays on you, even when the world tries to spit on it." He paused, and for a moment, the future felt like a promise, not a threat. This story could have ended in that chapel, that day, that aisle. But you know what? He lifted his head, steady and unflinching. "We're not ending this. We're beginning." The hall erupted. The audience stood, because for once, someone had said the truth, and they recognized it. Back in that chapel, now silent, a new monument sat on the front pew, a simple plaque. Here she stood, and here he stood upright. Tourists visit now, guides point. They tell students and children the story, a black boy who refused to be erased in plain sight. Black mothers take their children there, whispering, "See that? That's the man who refused to bend." And on the Robinson front porch, there sat Samuel Robinson, a newspaper open on his lap. Front page, Darius delivering the speech. Headlines bold, people talking, justice being recognized. Samuel smiled, quietly, without grandeur, and he said softly, "I knew. I always knew." He paused and then added, "I just waited for them to catch up." And so the journey ends, not with a fairy tale finish, but with something far more real. A beginning, without a veil, without a facade, with dignity intact, with pain remembered, with victory earned. Because even if someone leaves you at the altar, when you stand tall, when you refuse to walk away from who you are, they never forget who stood before them. And damn, now you know it too.